Well, today's parable of the waiting bridesmaids might bring to mind some of the waiting that has gone on this week. As Susan said, waiting for those votes to be counted in that country far across the seas, and our own politicians actually waiting for their final election count, which had quite a few changes on Friday. There's other things that I'm sure in your lives you've been waiting for. Kate's waiting to become a grandmother and it hasn't happened yet, and it's, getting frustrating. And I'm sure some of you have been, waiting for answers to emails, or waiting for something to happen, or waiting in traffic. Waiting, it's something that we do at different levels of our lives all the time. But the bridesmaids in Jesus' parable were waiting for the bridegroom. Now, in Jesus' time, the wedding feast happened at the bridegroom's house, and the bridegroom came to the bride's house to get her and all her family and take them across kind of in procession, assuming they were in the same village. But he didn't come until the dowry negotiations were finished with the bride's father. Note, in the whole story, the bride is not mentioned. She's just, somewhere in the background. So presumably the dowry negotiations had gone on late into the night, and that is why the bridegroom is late. And the bridesmaids needed lamps to light the way, and they needed oil in their lamps to go to where the banquet was being held. And 5 of the bridesmaids have spare oil to fill up their lamps, and 5 of them do not. And when he arrives, the 5 who don't have oil would like the others to share, but they don't, and so the procession leaves without them. It doesn't really seem like a very good model of Christian behaviour, does it? They're told to go and buy more oil. Well, obviously the oil merchants aren't going to be open in the middle of the night, and so when they finally get to the bridegroom's house, the door is shut. And the bridegroom says, "Sorry, you can't come in. I don't know who you are." So what happened to "do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven"? There's no hoarding of oil there. And what about "ask and it will be given to you, search and you will find, knock and the door will be opened for you"? And here the door is shut. They're both other passages in Matthew. The parable seems the height of unfairness. And what bridegroom arrives at midnight anyway? And the so-called foolish bridesmaids had enough oil for the day, they just didn't have enough for late into the night. So we don't really get anywhere trying to sort out this parable in a logical kind of way. Jesus' parables are never logical, but this one is particularly frustrating. So let's think for a moment about the oil. The bridesmaids need oil like trampers need to take extra water for a tramp, or students studying well ahead of their exams, or investors investing wisely. You could always take the risk, carry a little less water and hope that if you run out, other trampers will come along and share theirs with you. You could borrow your friend's notes and cram at the last minute, or you could invest all your money in high-risk investments. After all, you get a better return that way. Until the day when the other trampers don't come or won't share, and your friend's notes aren't as good as doing the work yourself, and there's a financial crisis across the world. It's all very well until those things happen. So the oil is something that each person has to have but can't borrow from the others. We have to be ready while we wait. But let's pause for a moment on the oil there and look a bit wider. This parable is told right at the end of Jesus' ministry. The disciples are gathered on the Mount of Olives. They're gathered there after a day of testing the Pharisees and other leaders in the temple. And Jesus had promised during that day that even this temple that you're in, it will not last. All the stones will be taken down. And so Matthew says, when Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when will this destruction of the temple be? And what will be the sign of your coming," meaning his return, And what will be the sign of the end of the age? Tell us here now, while there's no one else around. The tension is high. The next day is going to be the day of the Last Supper. So going out to be with this bridegroom is going to take some courage. And what happens the next night when the disciples are in the Garden of Gethsemane? They fall asleep. So if these disciples are going to be ready, if they're not going to fall asleep, what do they need? What is it that we need to take with us? Well, the prophet Amos this morning is pretty clear. It will not be our burnt offerings, our sacrifices, our religious rituals and songs. None of those are going to help us. It'd be interesting to have this Amos reading preached in the United States this morning. Those in some of the more conservative churches who have supported Donald Trump are finding themselves in a different place, maybe with the door slammed in their faces. Amos says, I don't want all of that you've been giving, God. Instead, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Amos is a prophet from a very divided time. He spoke to the people of Israel in the 8th century BC, and he sees what is going on with the people. The people are divided, the country is divided, and they're divided about what king they should follow. And I read this in one of my commentaries this week. The commentator said, Amos comes from a world of sharp divisions. The people of Israel are divided into two groups. Those who will be ruled only by a descendant of David, the former king, no matter how corrupt that descendant might be, and divided between those who will be ruled only by someone they hope is like David, or who at least shows the promise of who David was on his good days. I thought, goodness me, there's some commentary for an election week. The day of the Lord that Amos talks about, the time of judgment, he says, will be darkness unless justice will roll down like water. So what then might the oil be? The commentaries again that I read said that the oil was either our deeds of love and mercy or our faith. And so a life lived in faith means the bridegroom will open the door. But the problem with that idea is that you end up measuring. Have I done enough deeds of love and mercy? Have I got enough faith? How full is my lamp? And I don't think God is in the measuring business at all. God is in the desiring business. How much do we want to go to the party? Do we want to go there enough to make sure there is oil in the lamp so we can get there? Or what if, another commentator wrote, Debbie Thomas, who I read a lot at the moment, she said, what if the bridesmaids had decided to go with the procession anyway, even though they didn't have enough oil? What if they just took the risk and walked by the light of the other bridesmaids' lamps? What if they had trusted enough to arrive at the door on time, but empty-handed? I reckon then the door would have stayed open, because Jesus never shuts the door on any of us. If we trust, even if we have nothing in our hands, if we think our oil is just completely run out and we've got nothing to offer, then the door stays open. So how's the oil in your lamp doing? Do you want to go to the party? Because the bridegroom's only question is, do you want to be here? What might get in the way of you wanting to go to the party? Thinking you haven't been invited? Being busy, distracted, or fearful? Worrying about what to wear? Getting lost in the duty and the rituals that Amos describes, but it's a party we're invited to. So bring the oil if you have some, and if you don't, someone else will light the way. Bring the desire, and then the door will be propped wide open. Then we will see justice that will roll down like waters, and we will see righteousness that flows like an everlasting stream.